Salesforce is more critical than ever. 10, 15 years ago, it was critical, but now everything within your business runs on this platform. And so you as a Salesforce team are now responsible for absolutely mission critical, real-time e-commerce, internal applications that can't go down for a minute.
This is Salesforce Ben Insider, the podcast that brings you all the top Salesforce news, insights, and trends, completely unfiltered. Join me, Ben McCarthy, and some great special guests as we dive into the Salesforce discussions you won't hear anywhere else. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to SF Ben Insider, the podcast all about Salesforce news, trends, tricks, and tips, and interviews with people that you generally won't see anywhere else. And today, I'm delighted to host Kevin, CEO of Gearset.
Howdy, Ben. Thank you very much, and thank you for hosting me in your fancy digs. This is the last, I think when we last hung out, it was like mostly virtual.
Yeah.
Now you've this cool place in Shoreditch, so thank you for having me.
Yeah, it is very cool. We got some graffiti. There's some shutters that come down as well, and we've graffitied the Salesforce Ben robot as well. So
that's nice.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But yeah, thank you very much for coming down today. So I want to talk today about a lot of different things, state of the Salesforce development ecosystem. You're obviously CEO of one of the biggest DevOps providers in the ecosystem, so I'm sure you've got a lot of insights into the development ecosystem, but also talk a bit about how DevOps is changing and also a bit about AI as well. But first off, let's hear a bit about your story from software developer to CEO, because it's quite an amazing one.
Yeah, not one that was terribly well planned out. So a few of us met in Cambridge. We were working for another company that did DevOps for the Microsoft platform. We started looking around. We'd sort of seen the rise of Salesforce and thought there was some stuff that we could bring across. There were some things that we knew about DevOps and building tooling and platforms for DevOps that perhaps would be useful in the Salesforce ecosystem. So we quit our jobs and started Gearset. And it's grown from that. It's grown from sort of 7 friends building something together into now 3,000 or 4,000 customers, 340 people around the world working for Gearset. And the thing that hasn't changed through all of that growth is the sort of core ethos of the company, which was to build, to make the lives of Salesforce teams better. And so that we did that at the start through solving deployment challenges, and that's still a core part of what we do, but we've grown into so much more as well.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you. And were you entrepreneurial before you started Gearset? Was that like the drive to do it, or were you just super techie and wanted to create something cool?
Possibly a little bit of both. So the drive that I get is still from creating great products to help people achieve things. So I've kind of always been. I love creating software to help automate stuff and to do cool things or sort of novel things. And I've done that in my spare time. I've done that in the sort of day jobs that I've had. And that's still what I do as sort of CEO of Gearset. The interesting thing about the CEO role is kind of what you make it. It's a little bit dependent on the stage of the company, the ethos of the company. And so as Gearset CEO, I'm a very product, customer-oriented CEO. So I spend a lot of my time speaking with our product team, speaking with our customers, understanding where the challenges are. Different from maybe other CEOs that spend more of their time with the sort of revenue side of sales. So I spend a lot of time with sales, but it's almost all from a customer perspective. Or again, same with marketing. There's lots of CEOs that spend a lot of their time there thinking about how to grow the company sort of inorganically. Whereas at Gearset, we think about it a lot. What's our customers trying to achieve? How can we help them? And then how can the whole business rally around that?
Yeah, nice. Yeah, similar to me, I'm mostly involved in the content side of the business. Yeah. It's something I started with the blog and
the luxury of our roles is you get to choose. So you get to choose which parts of the role you love and want to lean into and where your strengths are, and then which parts you maybe need some help with. Like where do you want to build a team around you to do some of the things either you're not so good at or else don't get as much energy from. And often those things are correlated. And so, I suspect that we sort of approach that similarly. Do the thing you're good at. And the thing that I was good at was building software to help people.
Yeah, amazing. And I believe you've made your first acquisition.
Sure did, yeah.
First acquisition, Clayton, recently.
Lorenzo and the team decided to come across and join forces. Yeah, it was a match made in heaven. So we've known Lorenzo for a whole bunch of years. He's an amazing, like a true entrepreneur that built an amazing product to help people in the Salesforce ecosystem drive quality and shift left. So you can think of it a lot like code scanning, because that's like the easiest thing to bucket it in, but actually it goes way, way, way beyond, because it has this deep understanding of both your Salesforce code, but also all of the rest of the stuff that makes up your app, permissions and flows and all the other complex metadata types. And it's just this amazing software that will spot errors, performance issues, help you adhere to that well-architected framework, and just help Salesforce teams before they get to a deployment. So way earlier in your life cycle when you're building out your solution, Clayton's just like the wisest sage, the world's best architect sitting on your shoulder saying like, hey, that's good, but actually if you do it this way, and the team built some really great workflows that integrate both into your IDE and then into your source control system to help drive quality through every stage of that cycle. So yeah, we've known Lorenzo for years.
And he's a CTA, right? So you're getting the knowledge of that CTA. And
yeah, he's CEO. So he was everything: CEO, chief IKEA desk assembler. So Lorenzo, when we joined forces, was sort of 6 or 7 people. So it was very reminiscent of early Gearset, and the challenges he had were very reminiscent of early Gearset and some of the things that we were solving. His whole passion for product was very, very similar to ours, because we'd looked at doing acquisitions a couple of times, but again, going back to that sort of quality bar that we have a product, like who we are in the world, what we're trying to do. For us, it's all about, hey, we don't want to take any shortcuts on building incredible solutions. And we're maybe a little bit arrogant that we think our solution's pretty damn good, and we have amazing software engineers and amazing designers, and we can build some great stuff. So when we looked around to do acquisitions in the past, there was always a little bit of a mismatch on like the quality of the solution, and was it as good as something that we could do, and were we happy to put our like stamp on it? I guess you put your name in the company for God's sake, but like when you're doing this thing, you start to become very attached to the quality of what you're putting out. It's sort of all wrapped up in your sense of self and everything. So for us, we only wanted to do M&A if something was as good or better than we could have built, and Lorenzo frankly built something better than we ever could have. Wow. It was an amazing product and an amazing team that we continue to work with.
Nice, very cool. Yeah, only heard good things about Clayton. And I saw on LinkedIn you've recently had your company gathering that looked very cool. How many people are you in Gearset?
I think we're about 340, 350. Wow. It just keeps growing. Yeah. And yeah, they're based all over the world. So we have some folks out in Denmark, some folks in Italy. The majority of people are here in the UK. And then a bunch of folks out in Chicago in the United States as well. And once a year, well, actually twice a year. So once a year for a company kickoff, we bring everybody in from around the world. We get some conference space, and it's all just looking back on the year and more importantly, planning through what the next year looks like from a product, customer, ecosystem, everything perspective. And then the other time we get together is in the summer, which is much less company valuable. We just bring everybody together for a big party somewhere outside Cambridge in a nice, hopefully a nice sunshine. And for like the 10 years we've been doing Gearset, we've had sunshine every time we've done this. So.
Oh wow! Was it 10 years last year, or
it's 10? It's again like this. The start of it's kind of grey because like when were we actually technically doing this thing? But it's about 10 years this year.
Yeah. Oh wow! Amazing! Congrats! Very cool. I just want to say this episode isn't sponsored in any way. But I genuinely think, Gearset is a very well-respected company out there, and I think people would be very interested to hear this kind of information. But as someone who hasn't been a CEO before, I'd imagine,
No.
Like I hear a lot of stuff from the ecosystem. I always hear a lot of gossip from various companies, but I never hear anything bad about Gearset, which
that's very nice.
I think is quite cool. But what is your approach to making a great culture? From the outside in, Gearset does look like a very nice place to work. Well, personally, I don't see many people leaving. What has been your approach to fostering the culture from someone who's never done that before?
Yeah, culture is an interesting one because what's good culture for one person may be bad for another, and so really what you're looking for is cultural fit and being deliberate and intentional about the type of group of people you want to be and how you treat each other and and what your values are and what's important. So I think being articulate and clear about that and deliberate and intentional is important. And then talking to folks that are going to join, don't try and don't try and be a chameleon and be everything to every single person. Be clear on who you are as a group and on what you value. And then if folks want to join that, if they value the same things, and hopefully they'll fit in and get along. And if they don't, then there's lots of other companies that are brilliant and have different sets of values. So for us, the values really are, again, it's going to sound a little bit cliche, but it's all going back to that customer and trying to make sure that we're doing the best for them. So we have this value of like focus on the job to be done. It's this framework of this jobs to be done framework by this guy, Bob Moesta, and a couple of others. And it's all about getting to the root of what customers are trying to achieve with your software. It's the whole like, you don't want a drill, you want a hole in the wall, or in fact, you don't want a hole in the wall, you want somewhere to put the pictures of your kids. It's that type of idea. And so we sort of put a lot of that stuff to the fore. We put a lot of transparency and feedback culture stuff to the fore internally. And so that culture is one that we've been deliberate about building. And I think the group that we've assembled all lean into it, and it gives us a whole bunch of strengths that it works for us.
Yeah, very cool. It's also great advice for people that are looking for a job as well, right? Like, really drilling into what kind of company culture a company you're applying to has, because obviously it can vary differently from being very, sales led, very aggressive sales to somewhere which is a bit more laid back, a bit more creative maybe. Or
yeah, and finding the thing that works for you. Again, that's the importance of it, and then trying to go beyond the very broad buckets and into some of the nuance. So Gearset is a highly commercial organization, so we talk a lot about our numbers internally. We're very revenue focused, but we do it all in a way where we still put the customer at the center of it. And so we're a sales focused organization, but without being so sales focused as to lose sight of the customer as the actual person that matters. And I think there's a bunch of nuance when you really get to know organizations and get to know teams as to, again, it goes back to some of the value stuff, like where are their lines, where are their limits, what are they willing to do to help grow the company. And for Gearset, it's always been, hey, our customers first and foremost, and then our team. And then if we focus on those things, then good things will happen.
Yeah, great, very cool. So moving on to kind of the current state of the Salesforce development ecosystem then. We've done a lot of talking on this podcast about how the Salesforce ecosystem has changed, because I think, I've been in the ecosystem for 12 years now, and it's just like night and day from when I think about when I started my admin career and how, in quotation marks, basic the system was in comparison to what it is now, especially in the way that, if you've had if you're a medium-sized organization, if you had Salesforce, the amount of development you would have done on it in 10, 12 years is going to be pretty insane. Yeah. But how do you see this? I'm guessing you've been in the ecosystem for, 10 years.
10 years,
yeah. So, how, from your point of view and Gearset's point of view, how is it changing, or how has it changed?
Yeah, I think there's a few different axes that it's changed along. The first is sort of just time. Time has moved on, and as you say, you're now building upon layers and layers and strata of the past solutions, and so orgs are starting to age. They're starting to become more complex. They're starting to become bigger technical debt challenges as the business has changed. Like in 10 years, because Salesforce is modeling and mapping out what our businesses do, our businesses have shifted radically in the last 10 or 15 years. So how has your Salesforce org had to adapt to adjust to that new reality? So I think that technical debt has been layered upon through time. Then obviously Salesforce as an ecosystem has changed radically, right? Like what Salesforce offered as a platform 10 years ago has massively broadened out on top of the core Force.com platform, but then also all the additional things that Salesforce have brought in through M&A, Slack, MuleSoft, Marketing Cloud, all these different things. So you just have a massively more broad set of responsibilities as a Salesforce team now. And then that leads on to really the third factor, which is like Salesforce is more critical than ever. And like 10, 15 years ago, it was critical, obviously. But now just everything within your business runs on this platform. And so you as a Salesforce team are now responsible for absolutely mission critical, real-time e-commerce, internal applications that can't go down for a minute. So you've now got a much more complex platform, a much broader platform, and your responsibility levels have increased, which is obviously daunting. But then Salesforce have brought out Trailhead. There's software like Salesforce Gearset to help you tackle some of that complexity. So I think the ecosystem as a whole has just matured massively in the time frame I've been in it.
I think the platform has also changed so much in terms of all the legacy features that you had to obviously Workflow Rules Process Builder, and then that had a 5-year lifespan or whatever, and then it was retired, and then Flow, and then Page Layout. Just everything has changed so much. And I'd like to think that, I don't know what you think about this, but things are maybe stabilizing a bit. Like Salesforce doesn't seem to be making, the classic to Lightning migration is another one. Like the features seem to be, I don't know, sticking around a bit longer and being developed on rather than going on to the newest thing.
Perhaps some of those elements are stable, but I think then the next tranche of innovation is happening. Like each of those things was a tranche of innovation, and I think that's still occurring. So how do you see Slack and Salesforce getting smashed together, like the core Sales Cloud and Service Cloud? How do you see Agentforce disrupting these things? How does that disruption drive a necessary change back in things that are, stable for their current use cases? So Flow is stable for its current use cases, but hey, smash Agentforce in there, and what can't we predict? How might Flow have to update, or all these things? So I don't know. I've sort of seen it all now for long enough. But yeah, it's all gonna. I hear what you're saying, and those tools are super powerful for their current use cases. And if their use cases were to stay there, then sure, they would stay stable. But businesses don't stay still. Salesforce's innovation isn't going to stay still. And then how are those things going to change? I would hate to predict that 10 years from now it'll look like today, because it almost definitely won't. It'll almost be changed in ways that we can't yet predict.
Yeah, very true. I remember when I heard this quote a couple of years ago where when people were trying to wrap their heads around how transformative AI was going to be, someone was just simply like, this is just the next level of automation. That's all it is. So it'll be amazing to see what will be able to be replaced possibly with the current level of automation with AI automation, as things develop.
For sure.
We did a developer survey last year, and we've got some stats here which kind of concur with what you're saying. 53% of devs said it's getting more complicated, 34% were neutral on it, and only 13% disagreeing. But on the flip side, only 34% of developers said they were satisfied with their skill level. That was quite interesting. So a lot of people were citing training gaps and resource deficiencies as well, holding their team back. So that was
I think a bunch of people that get into building stuff in general, you sort of come up with these job titles of like developer, admin, or whatever, but like just people that are like building stuff, they tend to have a pretty like intrinsic drive of curiosity. I've never met a developer that was sort of happy with their level of knowledge, or a builder that was happy with their level of knowledge. They are always intrigued by the next thing. And I think that's doubly true in the Salesforce ecosystem, where you have such a generosity of knowledge, such a generosity of sharing, user groups all over the place. People are keen to learn. People are keen to teach. You have things like SF Ben. Like I imagine when you started it, you didn't envisage what it would turn into. You started it because you were learning things and sharing things, and that sort of community ethos, and that that stat of being unhappy with their level of knowledge is unsurprising to me.
Yeah, no, very good way of looking at that, actually. And so how about DevOps then? How has the DevOps ecosystem changed over the past 10 years, and how has it needed to have, like, DevOps generally, but also how has Gearset needed to evolve with these challenges?
Yeah, massive shift in 10 years. When we started Gearset, we talked internally about DevOps, but almost never externally. because that term, it's hard to imagine now given its prevalence within the ecosystem, but that term 10 years ago wasn't a thing that people, it hadn't entered the lexicon of the Salesforce ecosystem. So when we started, we talked about deployment challenges. We talked about change sets being subpar. Is that a polite way to describe what change sets is? So we talked a lot about that, and it was really in the intervening years that we could start to talk more about things that were actually relatively common in other ecosystems and other platforms, and start to bring in some of that DevOps methodology and terminology. And that has happened with, then it exploded with SFDX and DevOps Center and Salesforce starting to lean into this in recognition that the platform had reached a level of complexity where DevOps isn't a nice to have. It's a requirement if you're going to build complex systems on top of these platforms. So we've seen that shift in perception. We've seen that shift in adoption. We've seen that shift in requirements. And we've also seen it be embraced more widely by the entire team. I think when Gearset started, we were speaking predominantly to folks that would use that developer job title or release engineer or that sort of thing, architect. And now we see, just the entire team embracing it. So no matter what your role is in building a solution on top of Salesforce, you, alongside all your colleagues and team members, are embedded in a single process that takes you from, business change requests through to thing running in production and understanding how it's running in production. So we've seen that shift, and then how has Gearset adapted to it? Possibly like the same journey as well, where we kind of, at the very, very start of Gearset, we sat down and we drew what version 10 of Gearset would look like. We did this workshop with Steve Chambers was our first and our first designer and product guy, and he is amazing. He's still with the company, and he drew out what version 10 would be.
Sorry, you drew out version 10 when you started?
Yeah, the very start of the company. Wow. We wanted to have this idea.
That's an interesting thought experiment.
Yeah, we wanted to see what it could be, right? Like, we were so resource constrained. We were tackling deployment first, but we wanted to know what could it be in 10 years, or like version 10. It was just this ethereal concept off in the future, right? Like, if we could grow to have, at that stage we were like 6 or 7 people. So imagine we could have had 20 software engineers, like what could we have turned it into type of thought experiment. And for us, it was about supporting just the largest Salesforce teams in the world, building across all the different clouds, not solving just the deployment challenges for them, but helping them shift left to drive quality through their code and through the review process, helping them orchestrate complex releases across regions, into observability, helping them understand what it would look like whenever they have something in production. Is it performing the way they expect? All that sort of stuff. So we drew that out at the very, very start, but then we didn't have 340 people doing it, so we had to start where we started. So we started with deployment challenges for small teams. That was the biggest sort of lever that we had to move that boulder at that point. And the last 10 years, we've just been growing and growing and growing into that vision. I think our deployment product, our DevOps product, that core deployment and release orchestration product is, I'm biased obviously, but I think it's an excellent product. We now have realized our vision of the largest Salesforce teams in the world use our software to manage their releases, and it makes me super proud to see their logos then when I'm out in the world. That's very cool. With Clayton, we've started to deliver on that vision of shift left and bring in code quality, and code's the wrong word, but like that app quality at the very start of the DevOps life cycle and the whole way through. And actually just last week we GA'd our observability product. So now from business change request through to something running in production, we can help you at every single stage drive quality and know what you're doing. And it's kind of how we build software. So the other thing that was going on in the early days is we build Gearset using a whole bunch of this mindset. It's like something that was core to, I'm a hopefully okay CEO, but I'm a pretty good software engineer, and the guys that we did it all with were pretty good software engineers. And so we kind of knew what we what we were trying to deliver, not just the software, but how people would behave when they were able to like grasp the software. And so Gearset, we release 2 or 3 times a day all of our products to all of our customers across all of our data centers around the world. We do that like 2, 3 times a day, every single day. There's no package installation thing. There's no like upgrade cycle. There's none of that stuff. Just every single day for the last 10 years, we have delivered Gearset, a new version of it, to all of our customers every single day. And so that's the kind of capability that we wanted to deliver to the Salesforce ecosystem. And we've just been biting that off bit by bit by bit by bit by bit. And last year and this year just feels like the product's in such an amazing place.
Is that quite an alien concept to some teams still, the continuous development, continuous integration? Because I remember I haven't been technical in a while, but when I was at Empowering Consulting, it was very common for people to do these big releases, and like once a month, once a quarter, but do have everything together.
I think that's been a big shift in 10 years as well. So it's obviously dependent on your environment, like what are your compliance requirements, what's the business's ability to absorb change, all these sorts of things. So it's not that we say you must deploy twice a day, it's that you must be able to. You must be in a position where that's a capability as a team you have, or that your release cycle certainly isn't a blocker, So if the business is able to absorb it at that rate, then that's the rate you should absorb it. I think that's heavily influenced by other platforms. You look at like door metrics, you look at just anything anywhere, right? Like on Java, on .NET, on Node, anywhere else that folks are building complex solutions, that ability to take release out as a blocker, that's the whole mission of DevOps, that's the whole mission of agile software development. And then we have customers that do daily releases. On Salesforce, we have customers that do weekly, we have customers that do monthly, or there's not so many that do quarterly anymore. Don't know,
It's quite a long time.
It's quite a long time. It's quite a lot. We do have some folks that do like up to around monthly, but even pretty much every customer we talk to tells us they want to get that rate of innovation. They want to get that rate of ability to adapt to their business's changing needs like more and more quickly. And certainly, like, we think technology is a huge enabler in that. There's no reason that you can't get there. And then you can make the decision as to like, hey, how quickly can we get the documentation, the retraining? What's the level of change? Maybe some changes we'll like hold off until they're ready, maybe once every couple of weeks. And then smaller changes that are, hopefully transparent to the user, we can just do every single day.
Yeah, nice. Cool. Let's do a bit on AI then.
Okay.
Wouldn't be a proper podcast if we
Absolutely.
didn't talk about AI at the moment. Just in general, what's your take? Overhyped? Is it a game changer? Is it the next internet? What's your kind of general thoughts on
all of the above? So I think it's amazing. Obviously ChatGPT spurred a whole new generation of enthusiasm and excitement for some techniques that have been there for a while, but just it packaged it up and did it against a data set that was so incredible. I sort of couldn't believe when I first used it. I thought it was maybe a little bit like AWS Mechanical Turk, where behind the scenes there was still some human interaction. So the scale of innovation is, even for like a slightly skeptical chap like me, is pretty incredible. I think it is a new paradigm, a new like platform shift on beyond what sort of cloud computing or mobile computing, beyond those kinds of revolutions. I think AI probably is the next, and seeing the speed of innovation in it is probably even, it feels different. Like the move to cloud felt transformative, but like, hey, yeah, this kind of makes sense. And then mobile, you didn't have to invent crazy technology to make cloud computing work. It was a hard scaling logistics problem. Same with mobile, all those screens and that multi-touch was like really, really impressive, but you kind of see from here to there. Whereas AI does feel different. It feels like this is sort of an unprecedented level of innovation that's happened in a very, very short cycle. So but I also think it's overhyped to hell.
Yeah.
So I think the technology is real. I think for certain use cases, it's absolutely incredible. But then, the fact that you just sort of jam it into like absolutely everything feels a little bit wrong. We had a you know, like every compliance team in the world at the minute is doing like a AI audit, and where's LLMs being used. We had a customer email us and say, oh, hey, I'm doing an audit of all the software. We're really big Gearset fans. We need to understand where you use AI. I know you use it, and then he listed like 2 or 3 features, your problem analyzers and a few other things. I know they use AI, but like, what else? And we had to reply and say, no, those were built using traditional techniques. They've been around for about 10 years. Oh, wow. They work so well that you think they're like this magic AI thing. But like, not all software that works really, really well requires LLMs. There is other techniques. And it was just this real like aha moment for me, where the customer had just assumed that we had some like magic AI stuff. So you definitely see this hype cycle playing out.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So we put out a blog post today that was quite interesting. We were interviewed 4 senior developers and asked them whether they thought AI was going to take their jobs, essentially. You know, obviously there's a lot of talk about this, with Mark Benioff saying he wasn't going to hire any more engineers, but then has lots of open jobs on Salesforce's website at the same time. And the layoffs, you know, layoffs from lots of companies. Mark Zuckerberg saying that, you know, AI is soon going to be able to do the job of a mid-level engineer. You know, lots of these kind of quotes flying around. And the general consensus of these 4 developers was, you know, they were senior developers, and they felt quite safe. And one had this quite good quote that was just like, he feels very safe because he is a senior developer interacting with LLMs, learning how to use them. You know, he said he uses them every single day, and in the future they could, you know, senior devs could be overseeing LLMs, you know, agents, whatever. But they all kind of agreed that they were worried for junior developers' jobs at the moment, because obviously, you know, if you've got an agent supporting a senior one, but then it does beg the question, you know, if that is true, who's going to be the senior devs in 10, 20 years time? So, you know, how do you kind of think about that? And, you know, are those types of tools being used inside of Gearset at the moment?
Yeah, so we use Copilot and make that available to folks for writing code. And then we use ChatGPT and Agentforce and other things across the business.
Nice.
In terms of that first question, so yeah, I'm worried about it a little bit, but there's a couple of things that, so again, you'd be a fool predicting the future, but there's a couple of things that make me think it's a fear that's a little bit misfounded. The first is that ask anyone that builds software, be it using low code, pro code, whatever. Like the code part of it is an important, but possibly smaller component of it than you might think when you're 14 or 15 and starting to try and think about, hey, maybe I could do this thing as a career. The ability to speak to others, to speak to users, to understand requirements, to understand the different types of technology that you could use to bring to bear on a problem, all of that stuff. So when I was a professional software engineer for, I guess about, depends who you ask as to like, was I ever actually a professional software engineer? But for like 10 years, I wrote code that ran other people's environments. And like, yeah, through all of that, code was a thing that I did, but it wasn't the most important thing that I did. So having an LLM write code to well-articulated problems is either going to remove or accelerate a part of your job. But I think the core of your job was always understanding what code to write, understanding how to articulate and express the problem. And we previously expressed the problem in code. I think in the future we'll still express the problem in code, but maybe now we'll express the problem first through a prompt that will generate a whole bunch of code, or maybe start to even hide some of that code from us. So I think the job will change, but maybe to your point earlier that it's really just the next layer of automation. I think it's going to automate away a bunch of stuff that was maybe a bit boilerplatey anyway, a little bit like, sort of the same was true like Stack Overflow, right? Like you could go to Stack Overflow and grab answers to things. And I think this is sort of just the next evolution of that. I think the true craft of how to speak to users, understand their problem, design a solution, make the right technical choices. I think a whole bunch of that is still going to be just every bit as valuable. And so hopefully it'll make people entering the industry just even more powerful, because now they won't be blocked by the lack of knowledge for how this API works or how this system works. They'll be able to just get an LLM to generate or scaffold out a solution once they've decided what they want to build. So I think it'll change an entry level job, but I don't think it'll remove them. And then as to this whole sort of drive for efficiency, hey, maybe we could do the same with less. Well, I've never spoken to any engineering manager or business anywhere in the world ever that didn't have a backlog 6 miles long. So you could do more with less, possibly. I think AI and LLMs could drive a whole bunch of efficiency that maybe does need fewer staff potentially. But I suspect what will happen is these businesses will just continue to hire the same number of staff because now they can do more. They have a bigger lever. They can move a bigger boulder. So I think that's what will happen. But who knows? I suspect Zuckerberg knows slightly better than me. But he's also got some conflict of interest stuff as to what he might want to claim, one or the other. I think it'll just be an amazing level of automation, and then that's always driven efficiencies and driven innovation.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing as well, of course, is like I don't have the stats handy, but the digital transformation market and the cloud computing market are still accelerating and growing by I think 10 to 20% a year, because there are so many industries that haven't been disrupted, even in the cloud computing market. So the amount of developers that are still going to be needed in the future are probably going to be way more than we have today.
Yeah, it's Paul Graham, software's eating the world thing. I think in the last 10 years, I think the last 40 years, right? Like building stuff on top of building systems, software and systems and code or whatever on top of compute resources has been getting easier and easier and easier and easier. What one person can do has just become more and more and more powerful. And I just think this is the next iteration of that, and possibly like just an absolute step change, potentially. Our folks internally, they're using it. They see a speed up, but we've seen like maybe a third of our developers embrace it, and about 2/3 sort of not loving it.
Wow.
Just because again, they're writing code is like one part of their job. It's not like they spend more time speaking to users and understanding what to build than like sitting down to actually build it. So for those folks, I don't know. I think the models will get better. I think that other 2/3 will probably use it in time, but I don't think it'll replace anyone.
Yeah. Okay. Honest take on Agent Force.
Agent Force, yeah. Back to the classic tension between an amazing technology and a need to be everything to every single person. I think for the use cases, Agent Force and AI in general, it'll continue to get better, and the models will continue to get better. As I said, I think this is a new paradigm. This is a new way of working, and I think Agent Force is clearly the future of a whole bunch of the Salesforce platform, and unlocks a whole bunch of stuff that couldn't be done before. So I think 4 or 5 years from now, it'll be like a primary thing that Salesforce teams think about and care about. And when we survey our customers, we just see the same stats, like everyone's adopting this. Then there is also like a level of marketing and drive behind it that's, you can cherry pick examples where it's amazing, or you can cherry pick examples where it looks pathologically poor. And, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. For some things it's amazing, and for some things it's not. And for those things that it's not amazing at, it'll continue to get better. I think Salesforce have put their stall out pretty clear that this is a massive initiative for the company, and they're going to continue to put energy and resources into it. So yeah, I think it's the future of Salesforce.
Yeah, same. I think it was well-needed reinvigoration for Salesforce, because their other stuff, their Einstein GPT stuff, it wasn't very well adopted. It wasn't free for us, or freemium. It wasn't, so people couldn't get their hands on it and create content about it. So yeah, I don't have too many opinions on the product because we haven't used it too much. We've been testing it out a bit, but I hear it could be better. But I mean, Salesforce are quite infamous for releasing stuff a bit early. Get loads and loads of feedback.
And people love to also like poo-poo new things too, right? Like if you're in a world where you're trying to generate content and slight controversy at times. There's lots of examples that folks have picked out where it doesn't work that well.
Yeah.
But it will. And I think the change from Einstein to Agentforce as well, a whole bunch of that's driven by underlying innovation in technology, like the stuff with ChatGPT and what we can do with these truly huge data sets. And you're sort of seeing that again with DeepSeek. You're seeing it with Gemini. And you're seeing it with the Nova stuff from AWS. You're sort of seeing this step change in what AI, what LLM can do. And I think Salesforce have done an excellent job of bringing that to bear. So they have grabbed with a big old bear hug this new technology, and they're seeing where it's working and they're seeing where it's not working. And I think from that's like that iterative innovation is what drives innovation, in my opinion at least. They can only build something truly great by failing at times. And I think Salesforce, in fairness to them, are a pretty brave company for doing that. They're able to put themselves out there, able to try these things. And so I think I'm pretty bullish on it. I think from that, good things will come.
Yeah, I think they were one of the first major software companies to come out and saying, and Mark Benioff said we're doing a hard pivot, which isn't like their usual kind of, we're rebranding, but actually,
Yeah, and he seems to have put his back into it, right? Like they did the agentic stuff before a lot of other people. He does seem deeply connected, and Salesforce R&D had done a whole bunch of stuff originally. So I think they're a really significant player here, and they're doing good stuff, and I think that's going to continue to bear fruits.
Yeah, definitely. When we were chatting before about how agentic tools will affect the world of DevOps, you had this quote, which is like the consequence of bugs is now huge. Give us some insight into kind of, what makes it different in this agentic world.
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things going on. I think the move to LLM and the move to AI-generated code is going to require you to be more mindful. And essentially now you're moving so fast, right? Like you're just moving really, 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 really fast because these tools have given you a massive speed up and a massive pair of running shoes. And so I think there's going to need to be more automation then to try and catch errors before they occur. So that's why we're so excited about Clayton and getting folks to embrace that way of working. Because if the code's AI generated, if it's not, you're going to need to be able to really understand how it's going to perform. And then the consequence of the bug thing is really because agents give us a whole way of interacting with other systems. Those other systems may have cost ramifications. Agents themselves, Salesforce, are obviously going to charge us compute time and invocation time as it completes all these tasks. So now a release of a bug, which was always obviously not exactly ideal, can potentially now be just massively expensive as well, because it's either going to be an agent taking an action on another system or just quite expensive compute time on Salesforce. And so all of this is just going to layer up to, hey, the systems that we're operating now are going to take a whole bunch of action that's outside of a very well-defined, very well-tested workflow. And I think that's still a thing that the entire industry is going to have to sort of reconcile with and try and understand. For us, it's why things like Clayton are more important, things like observability is more important. Observability was always important. We think when you release a bug to production, you don't want your users telling you about it. You want it either an entirely automated or semi-automated way. The system has picked up that a regression has occurred, a rollback package has been created, it's ready to roll back automatically or with some human oversight to say, yep, this is a bug, we need to go back quick. And then you have it fixed by the time the user notices. So those are, again, a whole bunch of very well defined techniques. And I think they're new to the Salesforce ecosystem. And I think it's well timed because with AI, it's going to become more and more important to be able to understand how these systems are performing. And then if the prompt or the model or something has changed, to be able to roll it back and go back to the last known good behavior.
Yep. Yeah, we interviewed someone from Salesforce the other day about the pricing model and asked about kind of rogue automation, if people be charged for that, and it was a yes. So
yeah,
it's
because ultimately, right, like it's the same. It's the same today. If you go spin up a bunch of functions on Heroku or stuff on AWS or burn a bunch of like RDS credit, you know, whatever, right? Like these are services you're using. Your code tells the computer what to do. And if you tell it to do something stupid, it'll do something stupid. And with the LLMs, it's very hard to tell it how to do stuff not stupid. Like it's always doing stuff that's like slightly, it's all new, right? We haven't learned how to tame this just quite yet. And so for us, that's why we think DevOps is even more important in this world. Like when you're building it, when you're releasing it, when you're testing it, when you have it in production, all these things require just diligence in a heightened way, perhaps.
Yeah, no, definitely. I assume you've seen Operator that came out the other day.
Yeah.
I found that really interesting. We released a blog post on Friday talking about can it do Salesforce admin tasks, like build a flow, create fields, and it's pretty impressive. Like, you know, it's obviously doesn't do anything flawlessly. But I really liked it because when people first started talking about agents, I think everyone's first thought is, I don't want agents going off and doing stuff and I don't know about it. Yeah. But Operator, I think, gives you a little glimpse into how it kind of works. You know, if you need to enter sensitive information or make a big decision, it comes back to you and says, can I continue with this? And you can kind of get a sense for what it can do, which is really anything that has a web browser, anything you can access with a web browser, you can do it. How do you view tools like Operator versus kind of other agents? Because it brings us this whole kind of conversation around, is it API led or could it be potentially UI led?
Yeah, exactly that. And which things require a sense of discovery, which obviously agents are great at, and interpreting a new web page it hasn't seen before and noodling it out and doing the reasoning and the mixture of expert stuff, or which things are just very well understood problems. They're very well understood problems that you can put an API around, and then you can execute it both cheaply and in
mass as well.
En masse, and also in a way that's just absolutely 100% verifiably repeatable. And we can just do that all day long, and that's all that code will ever do, and it will never do anything else. That's rigid. And some problems require that, or not require, but some problems benefit from that rigidity, and then some problems will benefit from exploration and navigation, and then allowing it to react to changing, like the UI is changing under its feet every single day. Well, you know, it's hard to do an API around that kind of changing data model, but let an agent go and figure that out. And so I think we're going to end up, and again, this is a sort of tension between wanting to embrace new technologies and see what it can do and letting it explore, and then finding the use cases that really work and which ones are actually more suited to traditional techniques. And then with Operator, you've also got that cool sort of UX challenge, right? Because there is a trust, right? We've all seen a bunch of sci-fi. We all sort of like waiting for Skynet to happen, right? So you're sort of having a really interesting UX challenge as well as to how do you get, for the use cases where it is excellent, how do you get people to trust it? How do you get people to trust handed sensitive information? How do you eventually get it to a point where it is entirely autonomous and you don't have to like intercede? I suspect a whole bunch of that at the minute is just psychology and UX stuff, where it's getting you to verify, not because it actually needs you to verify, but because that's a way to get you to trust the system. And then sort of again, 4 or 5 years from now, is it still stopping to have us verify? Or at that stage, do we just trust it? Do we just like trust that it'll do the right thing? But again, I think it's all about that use cases. It's all about the jobs to be done, all about understanding how you can bring technology to bear to solve a problem, when to use new techniques that haven't been invented yet, when to use traditional techniques, and what's the right mix.
Yeah, great. Well, this nearly brings us to the end of the podcast, Kevin. It's been a pleasure to have you on. But any final words or anything you want to let the audience know about Gearset before we go?
No. If I had a team of people here writing notes for me, they'd probably tell me to talk about all the stuff that we're doing.
Heart out.
Yeah. No, if anything I've said is interesting or not interesting, if you agree with it or disagree with it, I'm Kevin at Gearset.com, or I'm at Kev from Ireland on both X and Blue Sky. The best part of my job is speaking to our users, speaking to folks in the ecosystem, speaking to folks that use our competitor products, speaking to folks that build their own. I love hanging out in Reddit and reading all the Reddit threads from our ecosystem. So if anybody wants to connect and chat afterwards, I'm more than happy to. But yeah, thanks for today. It was really
my pleasure. Cheers, Kevin.